holiday season again, which is consistently the time of year where I find myself standing for my personal favorite movie. Quite commonly to the detriment of my credibility, nonetheless, I hold a lot of value in self-honesty. And if I'm being honest with myself, my favorite movie is Love Actually. Love Actually has become something of a Christmas hallmark, playing on several TV channels every December since it was in theaters in 2003. Despite reviews being mixed between positive and lukewarm depending on where you look, much more so positive in its homeland of England than in the States, Richard Curtis's ensemble holiday film was a success in the box office, and was even the most rented film in the UK in 2004. It remains topic of hot takes and willing takedowns because Lord knows more than a few people are sick of seeing it, and that's fine. It's not for everyone, nothing is, but I think there's an infectious magic to Love Actually that's worth discussing. I have the rose-colored glasses of having watched it multiple times with my family every December, but that also means I know the film backwards and forwards, and to watch a movie enough, you'll have something to say. So, take my take with a grain of salt, but let's delve into why Love Actually resonates with so many people, including myself, around the holidays. Because it certainly doesn't have the typical markings of one. It's an R-rated rom-com that clocks in at 2 hours and 15 minutes, which nears the length of most superhero movies or Oscar contenders. But Love Actually's shocking runtime isn't padded by explosions or musical numbers, it's practically a non-linear anthology. The film whisks around 9 intertwining stories, all occurring side by side over the course of the 5 weeks culminating in Christmas Day. While this sounds absolutely suffocating, the writing and directing make the film surprisingly organic to follow. And while each story stands on its own, they all coexist and interact, even in ways you could never guess. It's a great big story of how a prime minister's sister is married to a businessman tempted to cheat on his wife, who works with a woman struggling to live her life to the fullest, who meets a wedding photographer. I should slow down a little. Each story is one of love, but also unique love. Such a wide range of experiences and characters are seen that I think everyone can relate or latch to at least one. The stories I think are a bit timeless and ultimately pretty sweet. Some perhaps haven't aged terribly well, but they all hit really strong emotional resonances and climax with satisfying closure. Love Actually gets a bit of flack for being sugary and cheesy, and while I think that's true to an extent, I actually really respect the film because not every character's story ends with a clear-cut victory, or even a victory remotely. Without giving away too much, some end on a note that's bittersweet at best, and while you'll find more than a couple truly happy couples at the end, true to life, not everyone has benefited the fairy tale ending. But never without sacrifice or a takeaway, because sometimes love means letting go or making a sacrifice. On a lighter note, the writing can also be really damn funny. There's about a dozen little quotes and moments that my family repeats non-stop.
Almost finished?
Almost finished? What else can that be? You gonna dip it in yogurt?
If you ever hear me or anyone related to me just shouting in a British accent, "I hate Uncle Jamie!" watch this movie and you'll know exactly why. The stories are sold by an all-star ensemble featuring the UK's very best. Emma Thompson, Colin Firth, Hugh Grant, pre-apocalypse Rick Grimes, Keira Knightley, and that's hardly scratching the surface. The characters are all so vulnerable and performance is pretty touching that even the most hallmarky malarkey just works. From Daniel trying to connect with his recently orphaned stepson, to Jamie and Aurelia's love that's blocked by a barrier of language, it's hard not to root for these characters. One scene that critics love to attack is honestly one of my favorites in the whole movie, in which the character of Juliet discovers that Mark, her newlywed husband's best friend, has romantic feelings for her. She discovers this when she inadvertently finds a recording Mark kept of their wedding that focused exclusively on her. People love to talk about how uncomfortable and cloyingly creepy this is, and how Mark would be a complete freak if he were real, but I like how raw the emotion is. Every time I show this film to someone, their reaction to this scene is audible, because of how well hidden the twist is, and what a gut punch it feels like. It's uncomfortable, and it puts Juliet in a tight spot, but it's an awkward situation, and one that no one feels good about. Mark's biggest secret has been exposed, and his reaction is a bit heartbreaking. This is all tied together by the film's exceptional soundtrack, which I can't play for copyright reasons, but definitely look it up, and the stellar performances from everyone involved. The stories all tie together and feed one another brilliantly, but this wouldn't be so poignant if it weren't for Love Actually's stellar and unforgettable cast of characters. Spread over Love Actually's entangled stories are over 30 named characters. Keyword being named, but we'll get to that in a sec. The point is, the story is one of many stories, and no one is truly the protagonist. Everyone interacts, briefly or intimately or otherwise, and has an effect on one another, no matter how distant each character's conflict or plot may seem to one another. The characters of Love Actually are true to life and organic. Romanticized? Yes, but what makes these characters practically leap off the screen are their interactions, and how these interactions tie into stories they have little to nothing to do with. It's very true to life in that we're all the protagonists of our own stories, and we all have tiny impacts on each other's lives without really realizing. No one in Love Actually is wholly good or bad person. They're all just people with problems and desires. The characters of Sarah and Mark, for instance, are the subjects of their own vignettes, but just briefly they introspect and speak to one another when they meet at a wedding, and they sympathize with and inspire each other a bit. And even though Mark has little to do with Sarah's endgame as well as the vice versa, just their small interaction speaks to their actions down the line. How many times do you think even an offhand comment you've made left a huge impact on someone? Inversely, how many small things have people said to you that you carry, that chances are they don't even remember? That's the appeal of Love Actually's characters. They're nuanced to a degree beyond what many film characters get the opportunity to become, because you see them when faced with one another so much. Some of these interactions are so small but add so much context to a situation, which is why I love watching Love Actually as many times as I have. It's actually been extremely rewarding because almost every time I notice a small beat between two characters that I never realized the importance of. Take the character of Harry, who's arguably the antagonist of a story involving his wife Karen by endangering their marriage, but is also heavily involved in the story of Sarah, where he encourages his peer to take the chances she needs to early in the film. Someone who's detrimental in one story can be beneficial in another, because the film isn't filled with just villains or just heroes, they're people. But what struck me on my most recent viewing of Love Actually wasn't only the nuance of the important characters, but that of the minor characters too. Even if a character is only present for one scene or gives a single line without even being named, they seem extremely multifaceted. The outlandish DJ at Juliet's wedding, Sam's bashful school teacher, Aurelia's gossipy family, they all have beats that actually speak quite a bit to their personalities, despite not really needing to for story or development. These minor characters feel organic, and feel like they have their own story to tell, just not in this film. This further cements the idea that everyone is the protagonist of our own story, and how people that are in and out of our lives in an instant can change them. Love Actually has enough locations and characters to fill a wiki, feeling almost more like a cohesive universe instead of just a single film. You have to admit that's more than most movies pull off in 2.5 hours, and it's not for no reason. The pathos of Love Actually is that of love existing everywhere, no matter where you look. And no matter how cynical or rotten you feel about the world, no matter how plain and unremarkable a public crowd may seem, they all have love in their hearts, a strong desire, and something they don't want to lose, their own struggle to overcome. This is why the setting of the film at Christmas time is so poignant, because so often we push and roll our eyes through massive crowds when looking through Christmas gifts at the mall that we could forget that they're all people, and that everyone could use a boost, a quick helping hand, sometimes just a brief word, especially around the holidays. The smallest of gestures can speak volumes. And that's what Love Actually is. Small interactions building to something truly great. That, I think, is the brilliance of Love Actually, and why I think it remains such a Christmas tradition for a lot of people, myself included. Sure, it's corny, it can be a bit crude, and if the same movie was made today, I think a few elements would be seen as archaic, or even a tad problematic. But at Christmas, you tell the truth. And I love this movie for showing that you don't even have to look that hard to find that love, actually, is all around. I said it.